The ancient secrets locked behind the walls of cyberspace has trapped those who seek answers of a time long forgotten, guarded by warriors bound by the fate of their people. In order to uncover the past, a new frontier must be made for the future. You're tuning in to the J-Blast Network. Oh yeah, welcome to the next level. It has been so long since I've been hyped for a new 3D Sonic game. So long since we had a mostly 3D game, and also the first time that Sonic has tried entering the open world genre fully, or in this case, the open zone genre. While at first it seemed that the game was going to suffer from many issues, as more and more footage got revealed, it began to all make sense. All of the pieces were coming together with new ideas for gameplay and new ideas for the story and just things that were shown off that we haven't seen Sonic do in such a long time. As a person who grew up with the adventure games and the 3D games and even some of the classic games, I felt as though Sonic was finally coming back. The Sonic I wanted was finally coming back. And to answer that question, is Sonic back? Is this a good game? Well, the answer is a long and complicated one, but that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's why I'm here. Hi, my name is Jay, and you're tuning in to the J-Blast Network as we reach far across these new frontiers to discover a new path in Sonic Frontiers.
I'm here, reaching far across these new frontiers. With my life, I fight this fear. In my hands, I hold the ones I love. Walk forward through the cold tide. Always the new horizon.
Okay, let's just start with gameplay. I won't talk about the story until the end of the video since it'll contain spoilers and this is a new game. So the review part of this video is just over the game mechanics and I'm going to go pretty in depth, so stay tuned. First off, let's start with movement now. I would say that the movement and level design are two of the most important things in the Sonic game because if one is good where the other one fails, the whole game fails in general. A lot of people would also say momentum plays a big factor in the Sonic's movement, so let's look back at the older 3D games to see how it worked there. In Sonic Adventure, Sonic was very easy to control. You felt loose and you were able to turn it in the direction at the time. However, the spin dash was very broken in a lot of ways. Jumping right out of a spin dash would launch Sonic higher than a jump. This allowed you to skip certain sections and levels along with being able to spin up certain walls. Now admittedly it was fun to do, but I doubt this stuff was intentional, but that's how some games are. In Sonic Adventure 2, the spin dash was nerfed and how far it would launch you. However, the trade-off was tighter controls for Sonic and a trick system that rewarded players for jumping off a ramp or a rail at the right time, would be launched farther. This change worked for the more linear level design that the adventure games had in its action stages, making the game that is more about perfecting a level with not just speed, but completely owning all of the obstacles in a level. Sonic Unleashed / Generations followed the linear path as well, but with the boost, which allowed Sonic to gain top speed, press of a button, removing all traces of building up speed. Sonic's jump and air boost was affected by momentum as launching the boost off of a ramp sent you further than just an air boost, and the level design followed that same philosophy as Adventure 2, except accommodated it for the boost gameplay. However, Sonic's turning control was not nearly as fluid as Adventure, relying on drift mechanics to turn properly. And lastly, on the opposite side is Color / Forces, which restricted the movement of the boost gameplay to make 3D sections more spectacle and crafted the controls to accommodate the more basic 2D platforming segments that flooded those games. And lastly, you have Sonic Lost World, where the boost was replaced with a run button and a fast spin dash, and the parkour system was implemented, allowing Sonic to run on the side of walls, which also led to be able to running up platformers to grab the ledge and get on them. As you can see, each 3D Sonic game had their own way of controlling, which divided fans on which style was the best, not to mention the original classic games having their own form of gameplay, with everyone bringing up the rolling momentum those games had, and you can understand why it's very hard to find the right direction to go in when we have to make a more open world format for Sonic. So which route did Sonic Frontiers take? Well, it did the best thing it could do, take its own path. I think this new style is the best of the adventure style and the boost style. Much like Adventure 1, Sonic can turn in a complete circle, meaning you have full control over the direction he's going in. The boost is now tied to a replenishing meter that looks similar to the climbing meter in Breath of the Wild, and is used to speed up Sonic a bit rather than speed through the entire stage. The trick system is triggered off of certain objects like Adventure 2, but it works like Generations that it gives you more points, or in this case more experience for doing the tricks, and you can do a lot of them at once. There's even a drop dash which comes from Mania that can give you an extra bit of speed, and the parkour system from Lost World is here to help with traversal. They tried to take the best elements from each of the mainline 3D Sonic games, and they almost got it right. The jump needs some work though. It's that awful color/forces double jump that stops nearly all of your momentum in the air. This becomes much more of a problem in the cyberspace stages, where you lose all your speed just from jumping. Another thing that was affected was the boost no longer having a hitbox, meaning you can't just boost through enemies, which this works in the open zone, but when you go in the cyberspace and it plays like a Generations level, it becomes a big problem. They even tweaked the movement a bit in these levels to play like those older games, and they should have done that for the boost itself too. Then there's Sonic momentum going up a hill. It's not perfect as it doesn't feel like you slow down, but to be honest, none of the 3D Sonic games did this, or did this enough to where people enjoyed it just for that. The closest you got was Adventure 1, and even then it wasn't used much or utilized in the gameplay much to really be that much of a factor. You mostly just spin dash your way through stuff. Only the 2D games really did that, but I don't think Sonic needs that to be good in 3D, nor has he ever had it in 3D. And I think Sonic Team feels the same way. I know someone is going to bring up some fan game they played, but that's just not what they were going for here. But what they were going for, that I think they succeeded in. It just needs a little more kinks tuned out of it to work properly. And you're going to hear that a lot with me describing this game. I know that movement section was a little lengthy, but it was important to describe that so it can go well with the level design discussion. It's a simple question. Does the level design work well with the movement? The answer is sort of. For the open zone, it's fun to explore the main terrain of the zone. There are many cliffs, temples, valleys, mountains, and other areas to explore. Kronos is the most basic of them, but the valley and the temple area with the giant diamond in the sky are memorable. Ares Island is the best in my opinion. It's not just a Sahara desert, but also a western desert and a beach with multiple giant ruins to go in and explore, like this underground section here. Chaos Island is also aesthetically pleasing and entertaining to explore, and it's not just lava, it contains mountains and has this sky theme going on, and there's some mossy areas, and it also contains some really interesting mechanics, like being able to use this bird robot to travel across the sky islands is just cool. And the great part about the level design is that it doesn't feel like an Ubisoft tower type game. You just want to explore to explore. You don't just feel like it was made to just go to these towers or go to these objectives and that's it. You just get lost in the world, and that's the best open world design you can ask for. Unfortunately, the issue arrives with level design when you start to see most of Sonic's level tropes in it, but it doesn't come from the level terrain, rather these floating challenge areas across the map. Now, some people may wonder or make fun of the fact that rails are in the sky, and it does look weird for this world, but Sonic had always had this. We were just in a forced perspective, so it didn't look too bad. To me, I don't see it any different from the random rails in Sky Rail, or all the different random platforms in the Arc and Final Rush and Final Chase, or the random rails above the water in Apatos. Same with the environment, although I wish it was more cartoony like Unleashed did it, instead of being super realistic like it is now. This isn't something that Sonic hasn't done. They did it with Adventure, except back then realistic graphics looked different from how realistic graphics look now, and they weren't as defined. So of course today, having these cartoony characters with these realistic environments doesn't always look right. With that tangent out of the way, these little mini sections work and don't work sometimes. They can be automated, but the ones in 3D work well, especially when they lead you to another area and take advantage of the parkour system. However, the 2D ones are the ones that I don't like at all. Why force us in a 2D perspective in this open environment? Chaos Island is full of the 2D ones and it gets annoying fast. Check this area out. You see the structure in the sky over there? It looks really cool to explore, right? Well, the whole way of getting there plus exploring there is just a 2D section, and you can't get out of it either. You have to commit to them to the end. They just gotta remove these. It makes no sense to have them with the game controlling that way. And bringing up that same section, I will say a great thing about the level design is that it lets you go where you want to go by choosing it. There's nothing that Sonic is saying or the game is telling you to do to get to that island. You have to choose how or figure out how you're gonna get to that island, and I really love that because so many games nowadays are gonna hold your hand and tell you where to go and tell you how to do do things or have to disguise that in dialogue, and it gets annoying. But in Sonic Frontiers, most of the time it's up to you to discover and figure out the puzzle of getting there. It's great. I just wish that the design in that area in particular was better and more rewarding to get there than it was. Cyberspace has the same issue, except there are some problems with 3D gameplay as well, mostly because of the homing attack having so much impact because it's tied to combat and not being able to boost through enemies. These get even worse in the 2D section, as jumping anytime slows down the gameplay to a crawl and removes that flow state that you want from Sonic levels like this, making you constantly use the air boost to get some forward momentum when jumping. And to top it all off, Cyberspace is just a bunch of reused content. Cyberspace only has 4 aesthetics, 3 being Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary, and the last being this really cool Cyberspace City area. And most of the level design is taken from older 3D Sonic games. Now, the levels themselves will only be 3D or 2D, but that doesn't stop them from taking only the 3D section of a Generations level or only the 2D section of the same level. Some of the levels take from Sonic Adventure 2, which is cool and all, but all I can think of is how much better it would be to be playing the actual Metal Harbor or Green Forest instead of having it be a bridge and have a Green Hill Zone aesthetic. They gotta stop doing this and use other levels besides the same 3 they've been using since 2011. I mean, we had vast locations like Musical Plant, Dragon Road, Mystic Mansion, Collision Chaos, and Altitude Limit. Maybe if they use levels like these that have never been remade before, it'd be more forgiving, but man, I'm so tired of seeing the same 3 level themes. That's something that those new 2D Mario games have done to their detriment, and it's holding back Sonic as well. However, this plus the combination of the open zone makes it more forgiving, as you don't see it all the time, and this isn't all of the content in the game, and some of the cyberspace levels are original levels in terms of design. Again, much like the movement, with a bit more tweaks like incorporating more Sonic's tropes into the main terrain and the environment and removing all of the reused content, I think this style can work out well. Combat has always been a controversial subject when it comes to Sonic. In most games, enemies are just an obstacle that is set up to help you progress in a level. In the classic games, landing on an enemy with the right way allowed you to jump higher, and in the most modern games, enemies are lined up in a homing attack stream or lined up in a way they can be boosted past. The few outliers of combat like Sonic Heroes and Sonic 06 gave enemies health bars, where you had to repeat the same attacks to take them down. Heroes being more involved with 3 characters having unique attacks, and 06 having most of the combat just be the homing attack unless you played another character other than Sonic and Shadow. The big elephant in the room for combat was Sonic Unleashed, which had the most depth in combat a Sonic game ever had. But let's be real here, it was just baby's first God of War, and it was pretty good, but if you didn't like that style of gameplay, you probably hate the game. There are some other outliers and spin-offs like Black Knight and Shadow the Hedgehog, but for the most part, combat in Sonic games have always been the best when it's added to the flow state of the gameplay. So how does Sonic Frontiers translate this? Well, I think this is the best combat in the series. It's not perfect, it's a lot simpler than what it looks like, which is a good and a bad thing. Most attacks go to the X button, at least on Xbox, starting with the homing attack, which goes into a combo, and as you progress through the game, you unlock more abilities. If you build up enough combo meter, you get the Phantom Rush, which is a flurry of attacks that looks and feels badass to use. Sonic can shoot projectile attacks as well, and all of them are very OP. Like, look at the damage that Sonic Boom causes. And later projectiles you receive do even more damage. You also get the ability to side loop enemies mid-combat. That's a new feature, by the way, side loop, which is needed to stagger enemies. Then there's attacks like Wild Rush and the Loop Kick that shows off more of Sonic's athletic ability. But that's pretty much it for your standard attacks. You have a parry, but it's way too easy. Early on I was struggling to use the parry because it has a long recovery animation when you miss it, but then I realized the game wants me to hold the parry down. I mean, you can hold this thing for an infinite amount of time until the enemy hits you. That's way too easy, and you can just wait until the enemy hits you to counter them. Kind of makes doing the parry less cool. The combat can be too simple at times, but it's not a bad thing. It's fast paced enough to keep up with the rest of the gameplay, creating a new flow state never seen before in a Sonic game. And in fact, it reminds me of some of the moves that Sonic would do in Super Mario Bros. Z or some of the other Sonic fan games that were made back in the day. I don't know if they got inspiration from that, but if they did, that's pretty cool. Also, some moves from Sonic Battle would be nice that were added in the future game. Now look, Devil May Cry or God of War, this isn't, but it feels like one of those old PS2 action games that has little variety in moves, but the combat was satisfying. Think something like Shinobi, and that's a good goal to achieve when creating combat in a fast-paced action platformer. What really enhances the combat are these bosses. There is a bunch of them. Most of them will be mini bosses you run into in the open world. You got your standard set of bosses like the ninjas and the towers. And what's interesting about this is that you can beat them in multiple ways, some faster than others, and some stylish than others. This level of freedom is the exact feeling you want from a combat system like this, and I'm glad Sonic Frontiers implemented this. The other type of boss are the scripted boss fights, usually being the more giant enemies on the map, like Ashura or Squid and Chronos. The cool thing is that they aren't all beaten in the same way. Like Ashura, for instance, you have to scale up its arms in order to destroy them, or for Squid, you chased it down in order to defeat him. And each island has new bosses to fight, like the Shark and Ares, where you hold on to its tail until you can attack it, or the Sumo, where you use the arena against it to bounce off of the boss and damage him from bouncing off of the ring as well. Or Spider in Chaos Island, where once side looping his legs, it launches you into the air and you have to dodge all of the spikes he shoots out, then defeat him. There's so much variety in the boss fights, and it's refreshing considering how most of the previous boss fights in recent Sonic games have just been chase the boss down. Now there's some of that here, especially with the bosses where you have to grind on things. I don't like those guys that much because they can get kind of boring, but there's more variety, so I'm fine with that being there. It reminds me of the classic and adventure games where bosses were unique even if they were an easy boss fight. There are some caveats though, as for some of the scripted fights you might not want to fight the boss again, as it does get repetitive having to go through the scripted sequence again, but you shouldn't have to fight these bosses more than once when you get enough portal gears. The highlights of the boss fights though are the main Titan boss fights at the end of each zone. I'm only going to show Giganto here because of spoilers, but man, these fights, bro, these fights. Sonic has to be in Super Sonic to fight these guys. Yeah, these guys are this strong early on in the game, and these are all spectacular. Super Sonic is using many abilities besides just dashing the enemies, most of them being the moves you unlock throughout the skill tree, but some are unique to Super Sonic's gameplay, like the Shadow Clone Jutsu attack against Giganto here. And Super Sonic has different attacks depending on the boss, and side looping a boss will do something to the boss, like sending Giganto in the air with a super tornado. And if you parry the boss, you get a special attack too. This style of boss fight is what games like God of War and Yakuza use, and it's my favorite style of boss fight because it provides the gameplay and spectacle to sell the fight to the player, and personally it gets me hyped every single time, especially these QTEs, man. Like, look at this shit, dude. Look at this shit, man. And the music for these fights. It's as if Sonic got mashed with Metal Gear Revengeance and Devil May Cry, which I never knew that I needed. These boss fights alone sell the game to me. I miss this shonen style for Sonic, but it was never as crazy or as epic as this. It's like Dragon Ball fused with Evangelion or Gundam. Or you could even say it feels like the action sequences in those Flash games that Sonic fans made in 2000s. Except all that is put into a game, and I can't be more happier than that. These fights are so incredible, but unlike the mini bosses, you can't replay them, so enjoy it while it lasts. This is probably the best direction that the game takes a franchise in. I can only hope future games can take from this, but could they even top this? I don't talk about performance much, but I feel like it should be mentioned here because there are some glaring issues, most notably the popping from platforms in the air. It's already hard for some to understand why stuff is just floating, but it's going to be even harder to understand why it's constantly popping in and out of the environment. I heard this is an engine issue, but whatever it is, it takes you out of the immersion of the game a bit. However, this only applies to the floating platforms. None of the terrain have this problem, so I wonder what exactly happened with that. Now I can get past that because some of the games I played do have bad pop-in, but what really made me mad was the frame rate issue. I'm glad I waited because it's resolved now, but I got the game on the Xbox Series S, and at launch it was supposed to come with a 60 FPS mode, and it was nowhere to be found. This footage may look at 60 FPS, my gameplay was stuck in 30, and when action games like this, especially fast-paced ones, the frame rate matters to me. It's resolved now thanks to an update, but it's strange to me how these issues got past launch, especially the pop-in. I mean, it would be a simple fix to just go in and have objects appear less detailed until you get closer to them instead of having pop-in, but maybe it was rushed, maybe something happened, I don't know. But I will say the game does feel great at 60 FPS. Switching over to something that does succeed on all fronts is the music. There's 4 types of music in the game, each one representing a different portion of the gameplay. The Titan boss music, as discussed earlier, is this raging metal music. The main music you'll hear exploring the island is this more somber, environmental music, building up the tragic history of the island as you progress. The mini boss music sounds more like the traditional boss music you hear in Sonic Unleashed, except some songs are more dynamic like Spider here. And my second favorite style of music, and the last style of music, is the cyberspace levels. Thankfully, the levels do not use remixes of the old themes, and instead, each and every cyberspace level has its own music. All of them are in this techno style that reminds me more of Ridge Racer and Ape Escape more than Sonic, but that's not a bad thing. It's always a debate on what style of music a Sonic game should have, but I like that we got what adventure games had by splitting the different genres of music into different sections of the game instead of making the entire game around one genre. It expands the soundtrack, and it's always a benefit to hear more styles of music for Sonic, though the boss music does heavily carry the entire OST, and that's a great thing. Finally, after separating all of these themes, we can talk about how they all tie together. The loop is simple. Explore the islands, get memory tokens to unlock cutscenes to progress the story, fight the mini bosses to get portal gears to go into cyberspace, beat the cyberspace levels to get keys, and use the keys to collect all the chaos emeralds, then fight the titan of the island. It's hard to explain it in a way that makes sense without describing everything else, but once you play it, I promise,
just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
There are some other oddities in between this loop, like some of the cutscenes leading into these mini games with the Coco, like guiding them to a safe area or removing weeds from the ground. None of these are fun, and you need to do them in order to get a Chaos Emerald. They're short, but I wish they were just gone entirely. You also collect Cocos in the world in order to level up your speed and ring power from the Elder Coco, though increasing your speed is what really matters the most, as you want to keep a low ring count so you can get the super boost when you max out your rings. Plus, you have 400 from the start, so that's not enough of a good reason to keep leveling that up, besides maxing everything out. Defeating enemies will sometimes drop seeds of strength or defense, which can be taken to the Hermit Coco, who will increase your attack and defense power, and he does it quickly, unlike the Elder Coco, who takes 5 million years for each level or whatever you want to level up. It gets tedious doing this over and over again. I wish it was more streamlined like it is with the Hermit Coco. Collecting these items on your own can take forever if you're searching every little part of the map, but thankfully my boy Big is here to help. When you collect enough purple coins, there are these fishing aids that you can go into that take you to a fishing spot where you can fish and trade what you catch for tokens to use in Big's token shop. How did Big get here and why is he here? Well, that's not important. It's how he is and how he'll always be, just like in SA2. The fishing is pretty simple, so those scared of his Sonic Adventure 1 gameplay don't need to worry. You just need to throw the rod out and play a quick time event to catch the item. No matter what you get, whether it's fish, stone tablets, or absolute garbage, Sonic and Big will be satisfied and make the trade for tokens regardless, and it's pretty funny seeing them get excited over some of this stuff. It's very simple and a nice way to use one of my favorite characters in the series, but even I must admit this feels like a crutch to the game design. You see, I explored and even 100%ed exploring each island each time, and I never had enough memory tokens to progress to the last cutscene, and this is like me spending 2 to 3 hours per island, so I have to backtrack forward or quickly use Big to get the tokens fast. I think they were scared of players beating the game too fast, but also wanted a higher requirement without having it feel like padding the players and create another sun and moon medal situation. Big does fix that problem, and he's not a bad addition to the game, but some players like me will start to tell when something is made as a crutch to avoid criticism. Though Big is a big help, so that's great. Despite this, I found the loop to be very natural feeling as I played the game without thinking too much about the flaws. I was enjoying exploring the islands and then naturally doing all of the objectives instead of just playing the islands for the objectives, and to me that's great open level design and a good gameplay loop. Cyberspace can give a good break from the world as well, and while most of the puzzles on the island are pretty easy, some of the ones at the end of the island, like this graveyard puzzle here, can be a little brain teasing and got me to think a bit. But I'd rather have more puzzles like this and less of them there instead of a lot of these gimmicky ones that you get throughout the island, like some of them are just hitting balls or parrying balls or just doing the sidestep, and it's fine one time. You know, some of them are cool too, like Tetris. Again, it's fine one time, but having to do that again and again, and you have to do this to unlock more of the map, it gets a bit repetitive. And I wish, again, if they just had more in-depth puzzles and less of them, that'd be a much more enjoyable experience. But one quick thing I almost forgot to mention, there's this sort of blood moon mechanic that's similar to how it is in Breath of the Wild. It's called the Starfall event. This is where a starfall happens and it revives all of the big enemies that you kill on the map, along with giving you this new roulette mini game that you can play by collecting the stars that fall onto the map, and it gives you more items. I never liked these events because the UI gets in the freaking way. That thing is just in the center of the screen and there's all these colors everywhere, and it messes up my tracking when I place a waypoint on the map to go find something, because now all these freaking lights are everywhere. And plus, it happens sometimes where you beat a boss. Yeah, I've literally had this happen where you beat a boss and then the event happens and the boss revives right where you beat it, taking away the portal gear that you just got. And that's freaking annoying. I don't mind the idea of the event, but they definitely need to tweak that. That shit's annoying when it happens. With that being said, to me, this is still great open zone design or open world design or whatever you want to call it. If I'm only playing your open zone for the objectives, then something is definitely wrong. It's where that Ubisoft tower meme comes from, as those worlds are usually just find the next tower or find the next objective and nothing else of substance when all is said and done. And while there are many issues and kinks in the gameplay, like the puzzles and finding those tokens, I think there is a great foundation here and a great gameplay loop despite all of these issues. I just wish there was more environments to play around with, like cities, snow, and the other amazing environments that Sonic used to run through. And with all that said, we can enter the story section. If you want to ignore spoilers, go to the conclusion part of the vid, which is the next part, and a timestamp. There will be chapters in the video, so you can go to that part. Alright, you've been warned. Let's dive into it. Sonic stories as of late have been a mixed bag. Many of them since Colors took on this more comedy focus rather than the more serious focus that the stories of the 3D titles had earlier on. Having comedy was not the problem, it was just the lame jokes, rushed tone shifts, and just poor writing overall that hurt the stories. It got so bad to the point that when they tried to go back to that series style in Sonic Forces, it was a complete failure.
I am not weak. I'm not weak. I am not weak.
Get in the car, kids!
So when we got news that they were going to try it again, but this time hire the writer from the Sonic comics, Ian Flynn, it seemed like things were going in the right place. The promotion of the game also builds up the mystery of the story, barely showing any cutscenes besides the ones that have leaked out. I admit, I was invested, but all that doesn't matter if it failed to execute it well. So, does it? Well, I gotta say, Sonic Frontiers is the best story we've had since Black Knight, which came out in 2009, by the way. Now, there are some issues, but it's not enough to hurt the story, and for the first time in a while, it feels like the series is trying to expand on its lore. So the story starts with Eggman on the mysterious Starfall Islands, putting his AI into the island system. But the AI activates its defensive measures, taking Eggman into cyberspace and activating the Ancients' technology. We then see Sonic, Tails, and Amy heading to Starfall Islands as all the Chaos Emeralds were drawn there for some reason. They then get sucked into the black hole and the game starts with some unknown voice commanding Sonic to tear down the walls of cyberspace. And that's where the game begins. Most of the game will be finding Sonic's friends trapped between reality and cyberspace and helping them in the Coco they find, which leads to why the Coco are here in the first place. You'd think these guys are co-op rivals at first, especially since they have a similar function to them, but it's quickly revealed that they are much more, as they are the eroded souls of the Ancients, an ancient alien race that are related to Chaos, or in this case, Chaos is related to them, and they brought the Chaos Emeralds to Sonic's planet a long time ago trying to escape a great calamity. The Cocos were Lucky Charms their souls transferred to, but without any memory of their past, though some are drawn to things they were attached to in their past life, and Sonic and friends help them go back to what they are attached to, which helps them find peace, thereby sending their soul to this mysterious symbol in the sky, aka the afterlife. So after explaining that, you can tell why the island soundtrack is so somber. We're literally exploring the remains of an ancient civilization, of an entire race of beings that died out and became these cute little knickknacks. That's fucked up. I didn't expect it to get that dark. You even get these flashbacks at times which call back to Sonic Adventures 1's flashbacks and even use the same filter that shows how some of the ancients died. A love brought to a tragic end, soldiers still following their duty beyond the grave, and a sidekick who never got to see his hero again. All of these stories not only emphasize the tragedy of the Starfall Islands, but also represents a relationship with each of the characters. Amy's is about love, and in turn she wants to spread love across the world after seeing the two lovers reunite and be happy even in death. The soldiers that Knuckles looked after protected their front to the very end, and Knuckles wants to protect it along with protecting the ruins, as that's all he has left of his past, much how he guards Angel Island and the Master Emerald, because they're also all he has left of his past. And Tails gets the most development relating to that sidekick who never got to see his hero again. Tails has been regressing as a character for a long time with recent games, having him not only barely do anything, be afraid of enemies he has beaten in the past, including regular egg pawns, and Tails acknowledges this and even berates himself for acting like that, with Sonic reassuring him that he's more than his faults, which will hopefully make Tails return to the more brave form in the future games. These interactions are great to see, and the characters reference older games like Unleash, Adventure, the classic games, and even some of the handheld titles. Some may see this as just pandering, but after years of them trying to remove the story connection from these games, we kinda needed it just to establish that yes, this is the same world as the previous games. And most of the dialogue is serving the story, unlike just having callbacks for callbacks like some other games. It's nice to see these characters return to what they used to be, but they still are sitting on the sidelines, and a lot of the development here won't be complete unless these characters become playable again. But this is the right step in the direction, and it only adds to the story. I talked so much about the old characters that I almost forgot to talk about the new one, Sage, the mysterious child AI that harasses Sonic to get off the island. In the beginning, she's cold and harsh to Sonic, just wanting him to leave because apparently whatever he's doing here will lead to the world's destruction. And she's not playing around. She sends the Titans after you, which instantly mollywops Sonic when he tries to attack.
If we are fortunate, it will destroy you.
You got knocked the fuck out!
She straight up bullies him at points and will never give any information about why what he is doing is wrong or anything else about the island. Though as the game progresses, she becomes more open towards Sonic to where she just wants to see him in action and eventually begins to respect him. Turns out she was the AI that Eggman put into cyberspace, which is why she was so cold to Sonic before, and she reports to Eggman about what's happening in the outside world. She's keeping him there to protect him from whatever this great enemy is, and as she sees Sonic's relationship with his friends, she begins to want that same type of family with Eggman. There's even this sad montage of her wishing she had a family. You know, she reminds me of Ray from Ava. Well, the Ava 2 movie Ray. She's kinda the same character a little bit because they share the same VA, at least in Japanese, and Eggman is kinda like Gendo, except he's less creepy and I think he's a better father, I hope. Until she sicks those Titans on you, which these last two are awesome. Wyvern and Knight. You have to chase down Wyvern and eventually you can throw his ass into a mountain and grab him in midair and shoot all of his missiles back at him. This shit is so fucking cool, bro. But the highlight has to be Knight. Not only does he have the best music of the Titan fights, but dog, look at his shit, man. Look at this shit, man. Riding his spike shield and catching the giant sword he has is so badass. I never expected a freaking Sonic X Final Fantasy reference in a mainline game, but here it is. This is peak fiction. The Titans are also very important to the story too. As we move on to the final parts of the story, you see cyberspace and the three Titans were sealing some evil power, and each time you defeat a Titan, you get this cutscene of the Ancient that controlled it reacting to another fight we don't know of yet. All while each time Sonic is getting more corrupted with more cyberspace energy as he runs and becomes weaker and weaker. And Sonic takes a beating in this game, and each island provides a new idle animation of him suffering from the effects. It gets so bad that he starts limping and collapsing in his idle animation. Once completing the first 3 islands, you get sent to Rhea Island, which is just Kronos. And you gotta climb Ubisoft towers.
What?
No, alright. I know that sounds bad.
This is disappointing. This whole island is just these towers. There are barely any enemies, no cyberspace, no chaos emeralds. Just run up these Ubisoft towers and that's it. After I praised this game for not having this open world design, well, there's more to this island because this is actually the same area that we saw in the first trailer of the game at the Game Awards. You can even see Kronos below. They didn't even try to hide it. It's literally the mountain that you can't reach when you're playing through Kronos. You're on that mountain. But back to the story. As Sonic climbs the towers, he gets weaker and weaker as he activates more of them. And from a story perspective, this is great. But again, the gameplay suffers here. It's literally all the island has. Once activating the last switch, Sonic becomes fully corrupted. His friends are freed, but he's on the verge of death, and the ancient evil has returned after using Sonic to fulfill its goals. All seems lost until Tails, Knuckles, and Amy go back into cyberspace to give Sonic more time to stop the ancient evil. This is the culmination of their character development, but I can only think of how much better this would be if we got an end of the world style scenario where we had a level playing as these characters to revive Sonic. I think that would help in the gameplay and character development, but 06 already had those styles from other modes of the game, and this would have just been 5 to 10 minutes at most probably, and it just wouldn't have been worth it to program all that stuff from a game developer perspective. So I understand, but once Sonic is freed, he teams up with Eggman to the latter's dismay, but it makes Sage happy, and now as a team, they have a higher chance of defeating this evil. Then we get to the last island, Oranos, and it's just Kronos again. Well, it's a little different, but it giving off more of a Kingdom Valley feel with more ruins and swamps and that big temple in the middle of the Rose Field. And it's just as big as the other main islands, if just a little bit smaller. So it does work. The skybox at times turns gray as well, which gives off this final area type vibe. This is a cool idea for a final level, but it's just the fact that we had this before and players can kind of tell that these were all connected islands at one point. Like, this wouldn't be so bad if the previous island was a different biome like snow or water. And there are underwater mechanics like Sonic losing his boost faster underwater and he can drown, and there's an underwater enemy that you have to stomp out of in the last 2 islands. So it makes you wonder if the underwater island got cut from the game or those mechanics just weren't utilized enough in this game. It's also, again, basically confirmed that Kronos, Rhea, and Oranos were all connected at one point in development, and they split them up maybe to save time and refine the game. Although Rhea doesn't have cyberspace levels or mini bosses, Oranos does, and it has new mini bosses, and it has the most cyberspace levels in the game, along with having the best ones. Remember that city level that got shown off early on? It's here on the last island. And on that note, Chaos Island has the most 2D cyberspace levels, so that dragged that island down a bit more. But the true question is, what happened? They said 5 islands with different biomes in the promotion for this game, yet we really got 4.5. I think the giant island is what the early rumors of the game from playtesters were talking about, and they mentioned the map was empty. When you take out all the platforms in the sky, the map can look pretty empty, so I think Chaos Island was finished in the second or the last year of development because they really put a lot of work and time to make these islands work. Izuka even said they had to delay the game to make it the best it could be, so I think with the remaining time, they added other platforms to the levels and refined what they already had rather than spending time making a whole new island, delaying the game even further. And they split the islands like that so people wouldn't be afraid of having a short game. And to me personally, my playtime went over 15 hours by the time I went to Chaos Island, well, by the time I finished Chaos Island, and I'd say that's a good runtime for a game like this. But I don't think it was supposed to end there. I think the game was going to have us go back to Kronos, and Aronos would still be the last area of the game, but it would be shown as one island that we would keep going back to. Izuka stated they had tried to make a full open world, but their open zone format worked better with audiences, and I understand stating 5 islands is better than just stating 3, because saying 3 without people playing the game paints a shorter picture. Still, I think they should have been more honest or just not say how many islands there were, because a lot of people feel tricked by the end product. I don't think that though, because Aronos is great, and I'd even say it's better than Kronos Island. Now, there are some repeat upgraded mini bosses, but they still added some new ones like Ghost, who you have to chase down and destroy its statue before it sucks all of your rings out of you, and the Caterpillar, where you have to grind around and shoot its ores back at it to attack it. Many bosses are reused starting with Chaos Island, which kind of proves my theory about it being the last island they made in the last year of just refining what they had, but I don't mind it when playing because the variety of mini bosses is still high. I know these issues sound bad, and they definitely could have gone a better route with how they handled the PR for this. But once you play it, I think it becomes more forgiving, because I was already feeling fooled by Chaos Island and was just happy that we had more content in the game left. Still, I don't think adding a snow texture over Rhea or Aronos would have hurt anything. Okay, back to the story. This part of the game is where most of the issues of the plot come forward. It's not the plot itself, but it's how it's delivered. You see, the whole game we've been stuck on the mystery of the Starfall Islands, and then on Rhea Island we get glimpses of the Ancients' past, including seeing them seal the ancient evil away using their titans. That part is fine. What I don't like is how everything else about the game is explained in exposition dumps by Sage on the last island. It doesn't feel like the game explained anything up to this point, and just kept bringing on more questions to the last seconds where they went, oh no, we gotta explain everything. The information is interesting, like finding out Sage trapped Sonic's friends to protect them from the ancient evil, and Sonic being able to make it out of cyberspace because his mind recreates levels he has been to before as a guide to get him out of cyberspace, and some more of the ancient history. But this would be much better if we got this throughout the game slowly, and then Sage could piece it all together at the end. That's kind of the problem with Ian's writing at times. He takes too long to give a way out or a lead to the end of an arc, and then the end feels rushed and kind of just happens. And that happens again here. When you get every Chaos Emerald that you can, Eggman brings the final one as we prepare to fight the last Titan, Supreme. I won't lie, this fight is a little bit of a letdown compared to the others. He shoots out these diamond projectiles and has a big gun, but other than that, he's not as cool as the rest, though it's very hard to top Knight. At one point he gains these angel wings and it looks like the beginning of Third Impact is about to happen, but then the gameplay comes back and he's lost his wings. Must have been a product of rush development. I'm Here plays in the background, which is the main theme of the game, and it does make the fight feel badass, but it's still flaccid compared to the other boss fights. When you defeat Supreme, Sage commandeers it and you go with her into space to take on the true enemy, the End. It's called that because it represents the end of the civilization, as it tries to end the new civilization on this planet just like it did before. Also, you can hear Infinite's voice here, which makes me wonder if this thing is where the Phantom Ruby comes from. That would explain how it could counter the Chaos Emerald somewhat, but that's not the strangest thing about this boss fight, because if you aren't playing on hard mode, then you just get a QTE cutscene and that's the end of the game. But if you're playing on hard mode, the game turns into a shoot 'em up, to which I can only imagine this is as a reference to the final boss of Radiant Silvergun, an awesome game by the way, you guys should play it. This isn't new because you had to play a similar minigame earlier for like 2 seconds. It's one of those forced minigames for progression. There's also this pinball one that has too high of a requirement in Chaos Island, but at least that's something that Sonic fans are used to. This is for the final boss though, and it'd be cool for a section, but this is the entire final boss, and it's disappointing. Look, I love shoot 'em ups, even though I suck at them, but this was a strange move from Sonic Team. I tell you what though, they saw people calling their games easy and must have gotten their feelings hurt, because this boss is hard as hell. Even they knew it, because if you die too much, they give you extra lives. You just gotta be able to use them well, which I doubt a lot of Sonic fans, unless you're like a Genesis guy or a Saturn guy or a Dreamcast guy is familiar with shoot 'em ups, so good luck. Despite the gameplay switch, the boss does give me chills, even though it's just a moon, but really the idea of it is that it's such an eldritch being, the characters only perceive it that way when seeing it. Plus it has some wicked dialogue.
Countless stars, countless worlds, countless lives. All fell to me, all brought to nothing. All the teeming chaos of creation brought to order, to neutrality, to nothing. Saw your mind as you ran through my prison. You have fought machines and gods. They were mighty. They were finite. I am infinite. I am nothing.
Now, whether the end is stronger than some of the villains before is up to debate, but it's pretty bold to make those claims. When you finally conquer the end, you get the QTE section of Sonic ramming into the end, defeating it, but not until it uses one last attack.
Please, look after Father.
Sage sacrifices herself, preventing the planet from being destroyed as the stars begin to fall on the island. Sonic friends are freed and Eggman mourns the loss of Sage. Sonic and Co then leave the island with new knowledge of their past and new frontiers to be made in the future. Meanwhile, Eggman can't let go of Sage, and the story ends with him seemingly reviving her, reviving his daughter.
Father?
That's my girl.
This story was amazing. Again, there are some issues. In fact, I keep saying about every aspect of this game, but the good always overrules some of the negatives. That's just how a lot of Sonic games are. The amount of new lore introduced in this game leads to so many opportunities for the future. I didn't even mention how the Chaos Emeralds were drawn here because of the Master Emerald, and how some of the ancients went to go look for the Master Emerald, implying that they would become the child that we know today, and explains why Chaos looks the way he does in Sonic Adventure. There's also these Eggman modes you can fish for that are lore dumps from Eggman. He mentions other races like the Black Arms, the Babylonians, and the Echidnas, and compares the ancients to them. He even mentions the space colony Ark. He reveals more info about cyberspace, and you hear him bond more with Sage, and he starts to see her as a daughter, comparing her to how his family felt about Maria. And he even compliments Sonic's friends, even wishing Tails was on his side because of his intellect. There's so much here for fans of the lore to go off of, and it feels like an apology for all of the years where this was just dropped and ignored. Sonic fans love these stories. They love Sonic's history and world on all fronts. It only helps when this stuff gets expanded and explored. That's why the comics and the movie are doing so well. We want to see these stories just written well, and Ian Flynn was the perfect choice to get this done. There are many theories that I can make from what is here, but I want to save it for another time because the section is already long enough. But I am excited for what the future holds for the gameplay and lore. I feel like a kid again, honestly, after playing this, where I was excited to see where the next game would take us, and Frontiers does not disappoint on that front. I hope Sage comes back as well. She was a great addition, and honestly one of my favorite characters in the series, which I haven't seen that from the games really since 2009. There hasn't really been anyone introduced that was that meaningful to the franchise. But I'm glad Sega has finally come back to taking Sonic stories a little bit more seriously. We can have those goofy ones, those funny ones anytime, but I just want them written well. I think if you mix both of those styles together, then you can create an even greater story. And as long as they keep Ian Flynn or get some of these comic writers, I think they're on the right path. I'm going to go off script for this conclusion because I feel like as a long-time Sonic fan, since I was like 4 years old, I have a lot more to say about this game to wrap it up. I think this game was amazing, and there hasn't been a mainline 3D Sonic game that has been this good since Generations, and that was in 2011. Look, Lost World was okay, Forces was Forces, and Boom was, well, it was Sonic Boom. But I have liked most of the games of this franchise, and it felt like the games that I liked, because I liked all of them, like the classic games, some of those classic spin-offs, the adventure games, some of those spin-offs, the handheld titles, especially Sonic Advance series and Sonic Rush series and the Rival series, the Riders, just everything. I liked majority of it. But it felt like for the past decade, a lot of this stuff was getting ignored. A lot of that stuff, if it came back, like Free Riders, was just terrible or was a letdown. And even when we got great things like Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform, which is amazing, we would then later get a little bit of a letdown with Team Sonic Racing or with some other Sonic game that came out. And I know people love Mania. I know people love Mania. And Mania is a great game, and it did make me feel like a kid again, just like this game did. But I can't help that there were a lot of things that set that game back, like not having fully original levels, even though it had those two new characters with Mighty and Ray, which is awesome, by the way, and Tails and Knuckles are playable again after so long. That was awesome too. I feel like the game suffered from not being fully original in its content, which is what I wanted from the game. And plus, I'm more of a 3D fan than a 2D fan, so I wanted the Sonic to succeed on all fronts. Like if we have these games, I'm glad we have them. But I want 3D games to succeed as well. It needs to both succeed. And that year, Forces did not succeed. In fact, Forces was the culmination for a lot of people who were Sonic fans in my era to give up on the franchise or make the video essays. You know, you started to become like how the classic fans were back in like 2009, 2010, 2011, before Generations came out, where they complained about all the stories and stuff and everything. And I just felt those arguments were so stupid, because I think the games work with a story, the comics work with a story when written well. And the movie, I mean, how you gonna make a movie without a freaking story, without a plot, without a writer, right? So it just sucked that it felt like the people were just getting on this brand and they didn't care, or Sega didn't care. It feels like Sega still doesn't care about certain things, but Sonic Team does care, and this game proves that. We have returned to formula stories. They actually got a writer who actually knows about the series and knows that Super Sonic exists, because the other writers didn't. Which, no offense to those guys, because those guys, you know, they did what they did a good job for what they did, but I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to hire a writer that knows nothing about the thing they're supposed to write about. It's just weird, you know? But in saying that, we've gotten a great story, we've gotten a great foundation for gameplay, and just great gameplay in general. I want to emphasize that, because a lot of people are scared this game is just going to be a stepping stone game, a game that has to come out so they can test the waters, and then the next game will be better, and that's what we wait for. But I feel satisfied right now until the next game comes out. I feel satisfied with this game. It's more than just a test fire or a beta or whatever people want to call it. They succeeded in the style, and it's going to be some issues. That's just how it is in game development, you know. Look at a lot of the first games in the style, even Sonic in its first style. The classic games were only great or only got better because they had that foundation. Adventure only got better because it had that foundation. Boost only got better and worse in some parts because it had that foundation. Same with every game that comes out, and Sonic Frontiers is the foundation for this new style. That's why it took so long, because they were experimenting with the gameplay, not just making the maps, and the maps were huge and take a lot of resources. That's why this gameplay took so long. And they can go back and fix this stuff in the sequel, but for right now, they've done a great job with the game here. I mean, I was enjoying every bit of it, man. I didn't want to stop playing. There were definitely some issues that came up, and I mentioned them throughout the video, but I just didn't want to put the controller down. I wanted to beat the game, and I had a great time doing that. And that's how you make a great game. And a great Sonic Enemies game, and I'm sitting here playing nothing like the hours I put in. Like I literally look at the clock, right? I was recording footage for this game. I recorded it at like 9 a.m. and then it's like 6 p.m. and I'm still playing the game. I'm like, and that's when I started the game at 6 p.m. I'm like on Ares Island, you know. I'm like just exploring. I spent so much time just exploring. I just wanted to find new secrets and, you know, run around the world, because that's just so fun to do, and find out new stuff about the ancients and the history of the map that we're in. And there's definitely some things that can be improved, like having more variety in the maps and having more playable characters, which Okay, they're listening. Like, but I'm glad I recorded this a little bit late because they just announced that DLC is coming. Free DLC is coming, and it's gonna have multiple playable characters. It's probably not coming out till next year, but man, that gets me excited, man. It's been so long since we had Tails, Knuckles, or Amy playable in a 3D game, and I hope they do it right. And this is even greater because that just shows that they're gonna have this gameplay ready for a new game when it comes out, but it's going to be here first, so we get to see how it is, how it returns to form. It's so cool. And I know some people are going to look at this game, just back to the game, so I know people are going to look at this game and see that the game is probably lacking compared towards Mania or Adventure 2 or things like that. But you got to understand that Mania was built off of the legacy of 3 games that refined that gameplay and just looked and had the chance to look at those issues and see what people wanted, see what people didn't want, and make refinements to that gameplay. The same with Adventure 2, the same with Generations, right? That's why the controls are better in Generations than Unleashed. You know, that's why they removed things and added things, because they got the chance to see that. And I think Frontiers is one of the best starts to one of these things in Sonic. I'm not saying this style's gonna stay forever, but they can definitely refine this style. I would say make the world smaller, you know, give us more variety in worlds, but make the world smaller, make it more like Adventure 1. It don't have to be that small, maybe more like Adventure 1, and give us variety in cyberspace. And please, for the love of God, stop reusing stages, stop reusing stage themes. We want new levels, we want new environments. That's what's gonna get me hyped for a Sonic game. I want like some crazy environments too, like they used to have, you know. I don't just want the same generic like lava and desert and grassland. I want those type of environments, and I think if they do that, if they fix this thing, they truly listen, because Sonic Team has been very open about this game. This is the first Sonic game to ever really have a big feature on IGN and all these other news sites. They were confident in this game. They wanted this game to succeed, and they still want this game to succeed, and they're still listening to fan feedback. It's like they actually care. They're showing that they actually care. So many people thought that Sonic Team didn't care. I know a lot of problems in the corporate Sega, but at the end of the day, we get the product, and we can't really just say, oh, well, corporate Sega did this, so I'm just going to like give it 2 more points or 3 more points because this happened. No, we have to judge the product what we get. You don't go to the grocery store and get spoiled milk and be like, well, it's not the grocery store's fault. It's just the people that made the milk that was spoiled. You don't say that. You're mad because you got spoiled milk. You want to return. You're not satisfied with the product you got, despite what happens. It's good to understand, to know what happened, but that doesn't fix the problem. And I just want to say that because I'm not using this as an excuse to defend the game. I'm just saying that, you know, it's great to see that they care, that they're trying their best with this game, and you can tell, man. There's even a song in the game at the end of the game that plays called One Way Dream that they've come out and said that it was supposed to be Sonic's team message to the fan, that they're not giving up on Sonic at all. And that's the best thing I've heard from this franchise in a long time, man. I'm just so happy to, you know, be a Sonic fan right now, and just be a fan of gaming in general, because so many great games are coming out, and I've been waiting for that big AAA Sonic game to drop, and it's taking forever, but it's finally here. Sonic Frontiers not only sets a new frontier for itself, but creates a new frontier for the entire franchise future as a whole. And I can only hope that we're going to get more spin-offs, like Rider series coming back, maybe even some more 2D games. I hope this is a great return to form for Sonic. And the best part about it is that it's not just driven by nostalgia, it's driven by something new. And that's what I really want, new. That's why it matches the name, Sonic Frontiers. A new frontier is being made with Sonic. With that being said, guys, I'm sorry this video took so long, or it took a long time writing this. So that's why it took so long. I just had to get everything right. So I appreciate you guys. There's more videos coming out, and definitely going to look at the older Sonic games like Sonic Adventure and Adventure 2 someday. With that being said, this is the J Blast Network signing out. And don't forget, you better believe, baby. Yeah.